Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Refugee Welcome Collective Lunch and Learn series. In these sessions, we aim to bring interesting and timely information to you, supporters of refugees. Whether you are a volunteer, community sponsor, resettlement agency staff, a local advocate, or just someone who's interested in learning more, we hope that you enjoy today's session on American Refuge, True Stories of the Refugee Experience. Refugee Welcome Collective collaborates with partners to provide in-depth training programs, weekly learning sessions, resources, and on-demand technical assistance for sponsors, practitioners at resettlement agencies, refugees paired with sponsors, community and institutional partners, and others to support quality community sponsorship programs across the United States. On the housekeeping slide, as a reminder for everyone joining the call today, there is a control panel in your upper right-hand corner that will allow you to submit questions through the questions box. So please do the questions box, not the chat box, please. There will be ample time at the end of the webinar for Q&A. Everyone on today's webinar is automatically muted. However, if you have any tech issues, please raise your hand through the control panel or submit a question in the questions box so we can try to assist you. Additionally, the presentation, any resources or a recording will be sent to everyone following today's webinar. And this brings us to our presenter for today. Go ahead to the next slide. Our presenter is Dr. Daya Abdo, a professor and author. Dr. Abdo is the Lincoln Financial Professor of English in the Department of English and Creative Writing at Guilford College. A second-generation Palestinian refugee born and raised in Jordan. Dr. Abdo's teaching, research, and scholarship focus on Arab women writers and Arab and Islamic feminisms. Dr. Abdo, thank you so much for being here and for talking about your book.
Thanks so much for having me, Derek, and to the Refugee Welcome Collective, a dear partner. And I'll talk a little bit about that relationship in a bit, but I'm honored to be here. And of course, holding in the light all of the affected folks in Turkey and Syria today who are struggling mightily after the earthquake that happened. So it's wonderful to be here. One of my New Year resolutions, Derek, is not to learn any more platforms. And so this new platform, I refuse to learn how to read the chat. And so I will lean on you to keep monitoring the chat for me. I appreciate it. Thank you. I don't actually, but I can't even know. I can't figure out which button to push, but I'm delighted to know that there are some folks on the call. And if you would like to introduce yourself to me, just put your name in the chat and where you're listening from today and maybe what you're doing. So as Derek said, my name is Daya Abdo, and I am currently in Greensboro, North Carolina. Greensboro, North Carolina is a refugee resettlement hub. It's been a refugee resettlement hub for decades, certainly since the passage of the Refugee Act in 1980. There are over 150 languages spoken in Greensboro, and we have not one but two newcomer public schools. These are schools dedicated to the transitional year of refugee children. So I'm very lucky to be in a place that has a pretty robust infrastructure for refugee resettlement and support. And this is where I've been for the last 14 years. But I want to go back a little bit to tell you a little bit about myself, because I think that explains some of what is going on in this book, American Refuge, True Stories of the Refugee Experience. So as Derek mentioned, I'm Palestinian. I was born and raised in Jordan. My parents were displaced in 1967. And my grandmother walked with her two teenage children, one of them is my mom, across the River Jordan and found her way to the refugee camps in Jordan. And my grandmother was completely illiterate. She made ends meet by knitting loofahs, and education was the most important thing to her. And so she made sure that her children got an education. And when my brother and I both got our PhDs, she was incredibly proud of us. So I think it's a testament to the resilience and power of refugee, and especially refugee women, who are determined to ensure the success of their children and their grandchildren. And my grandmother is a testament to that. I remember my brother and I have 4 siblings, but my brother and I were particularly close to her, teaching her, how to write people's names in her phone book and those numbers down, so she can stay connected with the people that she loved. But she struggled as a refugee in Jordan. Jordan is not very different from Palestine in the sense that, people spoke the same language, the food was similar, the culture was similar. And even then, she felt like an outcast. She felt like she didn't belong. And she experienced a lot of yearning and loss and lack of belonging, even in a country, like I said, where she spoke the same language. And I grew up on her stories of what it was like to live in Palestine and then what it was like to leave Palestine and not be able to return. She died in Jordan, having never been able to return to see her home town, which is Jerusalem. We're from one of the mounts of Jerusalem. So I grew up in Jordan, really just understanding, feeling, having a sort of a deep connection to that sense of displacement. And I came to the US as an international student on an F1 visa. I was here for a few years, and then September 11th happened, and I decided to return to Jordan. It was just very challenging to be here after September 11th. And I went back to Jordan. That was always the plan, to go back to Jordan and teach. I was at a PhD in English literature. I was very excited to teach at Jordanian University. And then a violation of my academic freedom at the university where I was teaching in Jordan caused me to decide to come back to the United States. And so I decided to apply for a job at a small Quaker school. And if you know anything about the Quakers, you know that they are all over refugee resettlement history and refugee support history. The Quakers are deeply invested in supporting displaced individuals. And I loved Guilford College's ethos, its focus on social justice. And so I decided to take the job here at Guilford College, a Quaker school in Greensboro, North Carolina. And I was, as I tell everybody, I was minding my business, teaching literature, until 2015, when we were collectively, I think, heartbroken by the image of the little boy Aylan Kurdi, who drowned along with his mother and brother as they were seeking safety and security. And that particular image moved the world in a way that, as you know, the numbers hadn't, right? We hear 80 million refugees. Now it's 100 million displaced people, 27 million refugees. So many of them will live in protracted displacement for generations. Less than 1% will ever resettle. Those numbers weren't really as effective as much as that one particular image that moved the world. And I remember being very inspired by Pope Francis, who called on every parish in Europe to host a refugee family. That was on the heels of that image and what it did to the world. And I was really struck by that beautiful idea. So we want to go back because we don't want to tell people yet about this fantastic meeting with the Pope. Anyway, so I was really struck by that remarkable, first of all, concept of radical hospitality that we're familiar with, right? It's germane to all faith traditions, welcoming the stranger, embracing the other. But what Pope Francis was doing was calling on small communities to do the work of welcome and hospitality, right? When he was calling on a parish, he was calling on sort of a small group of people, a small community, a little town, a little village, a little parish to do that work. And it occurred to me that colleges and universities should and can answer, should and can heed the call for hospitality, because we are exactly like small cities with all the things that small cities have, like housing and clinics and cafeterias and career services and gyms and libraries, to be able to host a refugee family and support them in their resettlement. And so I echoed the Pope's call to colleges and universities around the US and founded this program called Every Campus a Refuge. And Every Campus a Refuge started at Guilford College, but now it's a national organization. And what we do is we mobilize colleges and universities around the country to co-sponsor refugee families. These are folks that might never be enrolled as students on a college campus. to host those refugee families for a period of time on campus grounds, in campus housing. Usually it's faculty or staff housing that's available, or graduate student apartments, so not dorms, to host them for a period of time, provide free housing, access to college facilities and amenities, and mobilize a group of supporters from faculty, students, and staff who are trained and vetted to provide supportive resettlement and integration services, especially services that are really unique to a college or university campus. As you can imagine, English language acquisition, legal services, career services, access to all of these beautiful and enriching and rich resources on a college campus. So every campus of Refuge really started at Guilford College. I walked into the president's office in 2015 and asked for a house on our campus to host refugees, and she said yes. And so we partnered very quickly with Church World Services Greensboro, and they became our refugee resettlement agency partner. We hosted our first guest in January of 2016, an LGBTQ case from Uganda. And then we hosted a Syrian family. And then we've been hosting families ever since. We've hosted up to 90 refugees on Guilford's campus and supported them in their integration and their resettlement. And the effort has spread to many other campuses across the country. So this book, American Refuge, True Stories of the Refugee Experience, really came out of the Every Campus a Refuge effort at Guilford College. And it contains the stories of my mother, who lived as a refugee in Jordan, my grandmother, who also lived as a refugee, and 6 individuals who participated in the Every Campus a Refuge program at Guilford College. And their names are Chaps, Blaze, Marwa, Ali, Riri, and Fehmi or Sabah. They come from all over the world. As you know, refugees are as diverse as you can imagine, because they're different ages, different genders, races, ethnicities, nationalities, religious backgrounds. So these particular folks that we hosted and welcomed on our campus at Guilford College came from Uganda, from Burundi, from Iraq, from Syria, and from Myanmar. So I like to point out the cover of the book, because the cover of the book was actually designed by one of the guests that we hosted on our campus. This was Ali al-Khazraji, who's an Iraqi calligraphist that was hosted on Guilford's campus for about 8 months with his wife and 3 children. And Ali, in his home country, was a calligraphist and an artist who escaped death twice. There were 2 assassination attempts on his life that I talk about in the book. And the reason he was targeted was because he worked very briefly for an American company. Ali made it to Greensboro. And when I put together this book, I asked him to do the cover design. And so you can recognize, I'm sure, Lady Liberty, but I'm not sure if anybody recognizes the word that's in Arabic, that's in Lady Liberty. I don't know if Derek, you're tracking the chat, but if somebody knows, put it in the chat. But I will say what it is. It's the word laji in Arabic, which means refugee. And what I love about this image, for me, first of all, it represents kind of the promise and the premise for me as an immigrant to this country. I came on an F1 visa, naturalized through marriage. There was also always something deeply moving about this country's ethos of welcome to immigrants. At least that's certainly the promise of it. So Lady Liberty represents that promise to me, but it also in a way represents kind of the invisibility of the refugee experience. If you don't know that word in Lady Liberty, you won't recognize it. You'll think it's part of her design. And so sometimes refugees sort of fade into the background of our understanding of, what happens to people when they come here. There are so many myths and misunderstandings about refugees and about the refugee experience. But very importantly, this is, a testament to the kind of beauty that refugees bring. I mean, Ali is a fantastic artist. And now we can go to the second picture because now it'll make sense. He's such a beautiful artist. In September of last year, we had the opportunity to meet with Pope Francis, who, as you know, inspired, as I just mentioned, Every Campus a Refuge with this call on radical hospitality. And this is Kathleen Herbst, who's the program coordinator at Guilford College. She was able to go and meet the Pope in person at the Vatican. And when we found out she was going to meet the Pope, we were like, well, we have to tell the Pope about ICAR. And so Ali, that same artist, designed a plate that we gifted to the Pope to tell him about Every Campus a Refuge. And the plate says in Arabic the biblical verse that the Pope said or quoted at the time when he called on every parish to host a refugee family. This that you do unto the least, least of my brothers, you do unto me, from Matthew. And the image in the middle is the chapel of the Milk Grotto in Palestine, where the Holy Family took refuge from violence. So I love this full circle that Ali, who was able to really find support and love on Guilford's campus because of the Pope's call, was able to sort of gift the Pope this plate that represents that call to radical hospitality and welcome. So if we can go back to the cover of the book, it's important to say that I knew the stories of all of these people very intimately. So clearly my grandmother and mother, and also the 6 other individuals that were participating in the program. But I did not want to share their stories until I actually interviewed them officially so they can give consent and decide what they wanted to share and what they didn't want to share. So this is a creative nonfiction book, but I really wanted to make sure ethically that I didn't share anything, obviously, that I did not have permission to share. So it was really a fascinating experience because I interviewed my own mother and I interviewed all of these people whose stories I knew because I worked with them for years. And it was very illustrative because during the interviews, Blaise would say, I know you know this, but I don't want you to share it. And so it was a really good lesson in how, when working with folks, things are shared with you. It doesn't mean that those are public, that's public information, or that you have permission to share it with others. And I really, it was very important for me to make sure that I had consent and that I had permission. The other thing that you'll notice in the book is that all of the stories carry the cadence and the style of each person. I interviewed them in Arabic and in English. So I interviewed Marwa and Ali in Arabic, and then I interviewed the rest in English. And I wanted to capture as much of the idiomatic expressions, sort of the style, the speaking style, as much as possible. So hopefully you'll see some of that in the book as you're reading. And listen for those. Hopefully I'll get a chance to read some excerpts today, and I want you to listen for that cadence and that sort of narrative style. So I want to just say very briefly why I wrote this book, and then I'll take some questions if there are any, and then hopefully dive into some excerpts from the narrative. I wrote this book because as a teacher, and Derek mentioned, I'm a professor and I teach a bunch of things, including refugee and immigrant issues. It was really a challenge for me to find a book that represented the holistic experience of someone who was living a life before they came to this country as a refugee, right? Seeking sanctuary, seeking refuge. There aren't many narratives that capture that spectrum of the before, right? The moment of rupture, that life in refugee camp, the journey then to a third country for resettlement, and then the resettlement experience and post-resettlement, right? So that broadness of the life lived before in a country that you love, that was good to you, with family and people that you loved, and then the thing that happened that made you leave, and then the journey across a border to another country, living in a refugee camp, years of being processed as a refugee, the vetting process, getting on a plane, not knowing where you're going in the United States, and landing somewhere and then Googling that small town that you're going to end up in. And then what it's like to be here 5 years after you've come. So I really wanted to write a book that captured the breadth and depth of that experience, but in very individualized ways. So the book, the way it's structured, is actually structured in that arc. The life before, the moment of rupture, the journey to a refugee camp and life in a refugee camp, the journey to the United States, and then post-resettlement. And then you meet all of these people in every chapter, and you move between, each voice as you transition from one part of the journey to the other. So I wanted to make it as individual as possible. I didn't want to create sort of a mass narrative where people were not differentiated from each other, because The refugee experience is incredibly diverse, as you can imagine. But I wanted to capture some of the similarities. I also really wanted to write a book that didn't pander to the spectacle of tragedy. Derek mentioned I teach Arab women writers, I teach Arab and Islamic feminisms, I teach Black and brown women writers. Their literature is very trauma-informed literature in the sense that it's informed by traumatic experience. It can be very tragic. But I really wanted to write a narrative that was grounded in people's dignity and people's agency, and didn't make out these wonderful people to be pitiable creatures, right? I wanted a narrative that was grounded in their really resilience and their strength and their integrity. And I also, very importantly, wanted to write a book that busted some of the most common myths about refugees and to uplift the facts that we don't know about the refugee experience. So I want to pause here and take some questions. Hopefully there's some questions about Every Campus a Refuge, maybe how we can bring Every Campus a Refuge to your university, or how your resettlement agency can partner with a campus. And if not, we can dive to the book itself. But I'll pause for maybe a few seconds, Derek, and see if there's anything that folks are interested in wanting to learn.
Yeah, we've got some time, and like you said, we can kind of go back and forth. If there are some questions that people would like to ask Dr. Abdo, go ahead into that questions tab and feel free. I think at least one person, maybe a couple of people, just introduce themselves, to you. Just wanted to kind of say who they were and where they were from. But yeah, if anyone would like to have some specific questions about Dr. Abdo's work, the book, or Every Campus a Refuge, or anything else that you'd like to discuss, sounds like she is interested in discussing that with you. And then we'll see if we have a bunch of questions. We'll kind of go along that, and we'll just kind of keep going. If not, I've got a follow-up question or two, and then I would love you offered to read an excerpt from your books. I would love for you to be able to do that as well. So I'll make sure that we've got time to do that. Let me go ahead and look here in the questions. Hold on, I want to make sure I'm not missing anyone here. Yeah. So the first person just introduced themselves, and I really apologize if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly. Shafiq Siddiqui from Lutheran Family Services in Nebraska. The second one, hi, I'm Nathan Walker. I'm a volunteer and a co-sponsor, a member or manager for Bridge Refugee Services, a local resettlement local resettlement agency in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Let me see if anyone else has included. Doesn't look like anyone else, but please feel free. We've got some time here. Dr. Abdo, I'm sorry if I missed this, if you said this, but I was just curious. You said you immigrated to the United States, and did you say, did your mom and your grandma also come, or are they still in Jordan?
My grandmother has passed away, but my mother still lives in Jordan, and my father. Yeah, they come and visit. They sort of, come here and then go back to Jordan. Yeah, so they're kind of straddling both places.
Of course, I was just curious when you mentioned that. So you said that you have provided, in collaboration with CWS Greensboro Resettlement Services for, I think, did you say 80 or more?
Yeah, nearly 90. I think it's 86 or 87 refugees on Guilford's campus, but there are about 13, 14 other ECAR chapters across the country who are currently hosting refugees under the Every Campus a Refuge model.
Wonderful. And yeah, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that that Every Campus a Refuge model, and what sort of like supports or templates or kind of guidance and training you provide to other to those colleges who want to participate in that.
Sure, absolutely. And so one resource I want to flag very quickly is our website, everycampusarefuge.net. Another really exciting resource is the training that we offer through the Refugee Welcome Collective. So once a month on Tuesday, in fact, we have a training tomorrow. We have a training called Mobilizing Universities. And if Derek, if the link is available to you, if you could put it in the chat, but you can sign up for that. And our wonderful program coordinator, Kathleen Herbst, whose picture you just saw, she runs that training, really talking through how colleges and universities can support refugee resettlement by becoming co-sponsors and offering housing and other supportive services. So what ECAR does is that it provides campuses with really a roadmap, right? Everything from a best practices manual to a program coordinator handbook to curricular, co-curricular pieces that can help them develop this as an educational opportunity for their students. We offer community of practice. So by every 2 weeks, a session focusing on a particular aspect of supporting refugees being hosted on a college campus. We offer customized trainings to their volunteers that really supplements the Refugee Resettlement Agency training, because we train volunteers on how to leverage specifically campus resources to support hosted guests. So there is a plethora and a wealth of resources in addition to funding opportunities from Every Campus a Refuge for universities who want to follow, want to pursue this. And that link is also available on our website. So yeah, we have a lot of open access resources that can allow campuses to do this from A to Z. In addition, we have templates for memoranda, like an MOU with your resettlement agency, or between a resettlement agency and a college, so that you can decide who's doing what in this co-sponsorship agreement. The effort has really taken on at private and public universities. So we have a few state universities and private universities who have done this. And across the country, from California to Oklahoma to Iowa to Pennsylvania to Virginia to Georgia it's in a variety of states. And so we believe that every college or university can do this. It really requires, I think, sort of a relationship building between the resettlement agency and the co-sponsors and the campus to talk about the possibilities for such a partnership.
It's wonderful. Thank you. Yeah, we will include that that website and information definitely in a follow-up email that everyone will get, as well as if we can put it in the chat as well. I want to move to another person that chimed in, said, hi, my name is Miguel Riascos, Community Sponsorship Coordinator at the Center. They're asking, how long have you been working with refugee families, and what have been sort of the most challenging experience, perhaps in working with refugees and in sort of operationalizing this Every Campus a Refuge?
Yeah, wonderful. The Center, is that in New York?
I'm not sure. I'll let them.
Okay, maybe Miguel could let us know. Yeah, I've been working with refugee families in this way as a co-sponsor for the last 7 years. So since 2016, January of 2016. What has been the most challenging part? I would say the navigating systems in this country that are incredibly hard to navigate, that are challenging for people who are even native speakers of English or fluent in English.
Yes.
Going through the Medicaid phone line. We tend to host on Guilford's campus multi-generational families. So once we hosted an 11-member family. And usually that's like grandma, mom and dad, and children, including infant. And so everybody has different needs, right? Sometimes particular refugees have mobility needs or medical needs. And so just the challenge of the health system and navigating I would say navigating social and health services, that's number one challenge. Number two challenge is the speedy expectation for self-sufficiency means that folks don't have really the time, enough time to integrate and to be successful employment-wise. And so this pressure to take the first job that they're offered really sets people up for, just a particular kind of livelihood that's not necessarily sustainable. That's why every campus or refuge allows people more time at the beginning, because it's free housing, it's free facilities, not to have to spend that stipend and to spend more time for a softer landing and a stronger beginning. That I would say the two major challenges, at least in our experience, is this very quick expectation for folks to become independent, and the navigating of very complex social and human service systems.
Can there are a couple more questions. I'm going to go to that here in a second. I did have a question, kind of a follow-up question about your book, and I really appreciated, how thoughtfully, obviously, you took wanting to make sure that you got consent and was telling the story from the people that you were interviewing, from their perspective, and from and being true to that, what they felt comfortable sharing. Did you feel that people were able to sort of be honest about their struggles in explaining how, perhaps, like you said, just how difficult it might be to just navigate, American sort of bureaucracy just to get, the SNAP benefits or things like that that can be difficult? Did you feel that was included, or was it sort of a more, I guess I'm just kind of trying to get a sense of, did you feel like there was a really appropriate sort of balance of like the good things and the difficult things?
Absolutely. I think that's such a great question. So I think there are two things that are very clear to me from almost everybody that I've met, is that there's a clear sense in which folks are, in fact, grateful to be here, right? And we use that term gratitude, and I use it very carefully because one of the myths that I mentioned, actually the book, it focuses on 5 myths in a way. The 5th myth is that refugees achieve happiness in resettlement, right? That's kind of the idea that, well, you've made it to this country, you have everything you need. And of course, that really belies the depression, the homesickness, the PTSD, the significant challenges in resettlement and post-resettlement, the survivor guilt. I mean, these are folks who have left family behind in refugee camps in Jordan and elsewhere, who are feeling an incredible sense of guilt and loss and sadness. So this idea that if you're here, it's done, you're great, you're good, you should be grateful is a myth. A lot of folks experience significant, just as I said, a sense of loss and sadness, even years after resettlement. But there is no doubt that they feel that they have received an opportunity that they would not have otherwise received. And oftentimes people talk about it, especially if they're young, they talk about opportunities for themselves. If they're older, they talk about opportunities for their children, right? So that's very clear for me. Opportunities for children to get an education, opportunities for myself to be safe. Our first guest, Cheps, LGBTQ, that's he said, he said, I just wanted to be safe. I just wanted to be safe from the torture that I was getting at the camp and in my home country. So there is certainly a sense that they are experiencing something better, but there is certainly the expression of frustration with challenging systems, with sometimes lack of understanding on the part of even resettlement agency staff on what it takes to be able to navigate those systems, without enough time and without enough support. So certainly there was a balance, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the things too, this underemployment, that's incredibly frustrating, is this expectation that you have to take the job that you're offered, the first job, you have to take it now because you have to pay rent now. That certainly resonates. But there's also, like I said, the hope that, now you can make money that you can send back home, you can take care of perhaps a child that you've left behind, a parent that you've left behind. So I think it's a very complex experience, and I hope that comes through, that there's nothing about it that is trite or sort of an absolute about anything, right? That the refugee experience, especially in resettlement, is a very complex experience filled with joys and challenges.
Absolutely, thank you. I'm going to do one more, and then I would like to kind of give it back to you. I'd love for you to share an excerpt from your book, please. But this is, she says, hi, I'm Rachel, or Raquel, sorry, and I'm an intern at Lutheran Services in Iowa through Louisiana State University. What would be the first step in getting involved? I'm assuming with every campus a refuge. If someone's an intern or someone is sort of potentially interested, perhaps they're a faculty member or are connected with a university in any sort of way, how could they get involved? What could they do? First step.
Wonderful. Yeah. So I would recommend, signing up for one of our monthly informational sessions or trainings, because that gives you a sense of how do I mobilize my campus to become a refuge, right? In this way that we're describing, where you're offering free housing, access to resources, and by the way, it's a powerful, incredibly powerful educational experience, because students get involved and they get involved in really robust and also very ways that support the dignity and privacy and confidentiality of the families that are hosted. If you are asking as a member of Raquel is from a resettlement agency, Lutheran Family Services. The first thing I think I would recommend is reaching out to any local universities that might have asked your resettlement agency at some point to come in and give a talk, or maybe send you volunteers or interns and say, look, we've heard about this program that we think might be a good fit for both of us as partners. Can we tell you more about it? One really good way is to email me. My email is abdot@guilford.edu. Maybe Derek can put that in the chat. And I am happy to Zoom in with you and a colleague, and maybe a faculty or staff member that you have a good relationship with at a university, so we can talk about next steps. But next steps are really figuring out who is the champion on that campus. Is it maybe there's a faculty member or a staff member that you know really supports refugees and can potentially take this to the president and say we should join this program. Sometimes it's a student club. So Lafayette College, which is an ECAR chapter, Wake Forest, which is an ECAR chapter, they are run by student clubs and faculty members as advisors. So maybe there's a student club that you can reach out to. So find the champion on the campus. And then once you do, have a conversation about what joining this program means. And ECAR has a lot of talking points about what does this mean in terms of cost? What does it mean in terms of liability and insurance? Like all the common obstacles that will come up. And that comes up in our information session too, that's tomorrow and every month, once a month. We talk about what are some of the obstacles that you're going to get when you're trying to pitch this to a university, what are the responses, and how to get this going. But I hope that answers your question, Raquel, and please feel free to reach out to me.
Thank you so much. Would you please share an excerpt if you feel comfortable?
Yeah, I have 5 minutes, so let me share an excerpt from Ali. So like I said, I really wanted to bust 5 myths, but I wanted to bust them through stories because I wanted to ground the busting of the myth in a story, right? Because you can lecture at people all day long. As a professor, I actually don't lecture, but I can imagine you can lecture at people all day long and it doesn't hold. Telling stories is really the most powerful way of changing minds. That's my experience, getting to know someone personally and hearing their story. So one of the myths that I wanted to bust is that people leave quote unquote shithole countries, which is not true. Right? People leave countries they love, right? They're forced to leave, right? That's another myth. People choose to leave. That's not true. People are forced to leave. But this is from Ali and his childhood in Iraq. Ali was born in Baghdad in 1971. He is the second of 6 children, 2 boys and 4 girls. His childhood was wonderful, made more wonderful by the women in his life. Like his milk teacher in kindergarten. She was so beautiful, Ali drank the milk she handed out to the children, even though he hated it. Her beauty overcame him so that he asked his father to exchange her for his mother. His heart broke when she was gone the next year. Like his neighbor Amna, as a baby, he would wake up early, the first to open his eyes in the house, driving his mother crazy, and he would descend the stairs and crawl to the wall that separated them from the neighbors and call to her, Anda, And now, hearing him on the other side of the wall, Amna would ululate as if her groom had arrived, and his mother would lift him over the wall to hand him over to Amna's family. They would play with him all day, ululating and clapping and singing, as if he were a husband handed over from his family to his brides to spend the day. When Amna got married, Ali was so heartbroken, he cried during the entire ceremony. He refused to take a picture with her in her beautiful white dress when she asked him. A 5-year-old lover betrayed. Like his youngest aunt, Ibtisam, who lived with them and was raised by Ali's father, her brother. She took him with her everywhere she went, to visit friends, to attend vocational school, to shop at the market, even to clean him in the shower. At night, he slept next to her. When she didn't take him on her service trip, which was instituted by Saddam for youth to build affordable houses during their summer vacations, and took his older brother instead, his heart was broken. He could not stand being parted from her for that long. A 7-year-old best friend betrayed. Like his grandmother, who in the long tradition of Iraqis, before the war changed the very air and made the trees less frequent than the buildings, would sleep next to him on the roof in the summer. She always came down to sleep indoors in September when the nights were too cold for summer sleeping, but warm enough for the gentle fanning of the mahaffa, the fan made from palm leaves by the woman of the house. The stationary roof beds made of metal and painted to withstand the winter weather were set up in rows, a bed for each family member. Every night, they were decked with mattresses and pillows brought up from the house. Ali's family had so many members, their roof looked like a barracks, with extra beds for summer guests. As soon as the sun set, his grandmother would call him so that together they could spray water on the roof floor and cool it down. By the time the family went to sleep, the beds would be so wet and dewy, they felt cold. He would sleep with his grandmother and aunt on the upper roof, elevated above the lower roof where the rest of the family slept by a flight of stairs. His grandmother's dawn sounds usually woke him, drinking and gurgling with the water from her jug, her gulla, making her ablutions for the dawn prayer. Like his mother, who knew and memorized all of the traditional songs sung to children, the songs about Eid, the songs about playing in the streets, the songs about marriage, the songs about birth, the songs about leading your family, and the songs especially for girls, and the songs especially for boys. For one cannot spin the beauty of boys and girls in the same way, in the same song. I think I'll stop here. But I hope you pick up the book, and if you do, let me know what you think of it.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for reading that. I feel seen as a little kid romantic. I definitely got my heart broken by babysitters and others. This is very cute to hear that. Thank you so much. I know that there are, we are now at 12:45, and I know that there are a couple more questions, but we will need to end today, but we will follow up via email with extra information. Thank you for sharing that last screen there, Brianne. Appreciate that. Sorry, give me just a second. Yeah, just wanted to say, thank you again, Dr. Abdo, for today, and just also wanted to thank everyone for participating in today's RWC Lunch and Learn and for asking interesting questions. And I do hope everyone does pick up the book. Everyone, you will receive a follow-up email with a link to view a recording of today's webinar. I do just want to also point out that QR code is an opportunity for you if you have a phone. If you click on it, it's a survey that just gives us information about today's Lunch and Learn, and just generally if you're wanted to recommend other topics or speakers or things like that, or any other information that's helpful to us so that we can continue to bring you interesting presenters and interesting information. So just wanted to say thank you all again, and on behalf of Refugee Welcome Collective, thank you for joining us, and have a great rest of your day.